Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this video, I wanted to answer a great question from a viewer, Riggs2Ridges, and he says, I'm late to the game and binge watching your videos, or episodes, he calls them, which I'm honored. Thank you so much for watching all of them. What were your favorite lakes other than the Clear Lake and the Delta in California? A lot of you, if you've been following me for a long time, you know that I grew up in Northern California in a town called Paradise, which is right next to Chico. Of course, the town, Paradise, is mostly gone as far as how it was when I was growing up because of the campfire back in, I think it was 17 or was it 18? But anyways, so it's kind of gone. But anyways, that's beside the point. So really, honestly, my favorite lakes were neither Clear Lake or the Delta because I didn't get to go fish them all that often. Both the Clear Lake and the Delta were awesome, and they kind of align with my my strengths nowadays. But I really enjoyed fishing some of the lakes that were nearby. Lake Orville was a big one for me. So Lake Orville is right next to Paradise. And it's a deep canyon reservoir. So very, very deep, very relatively steep sides. No vegetation really to speak of. I mean, there's probably some. I don't remember any. But it's mostly a rocky canyon reservoir. And it's very similar to another lake called Shasta, which is a bigger lake and one that is probably frequented by more tournaments. Both Shasta and Orville were kind of my bread and butter when I was living in California. I love those type of lakes. And the reason why I love them, because they're pretty far removed from the style of fishing that I like, shallow water, power fishing, around cover. But Lake Orville and Shasta taught me a lot about bass fishing and especially finesse fishing. Back in the day, I remember, going from, everything that I was doing on kind of the East Coast, because I also, grew up fishing in Connecticut. So natural reservoirs up there, fishing grass and things like that. But when I started fishing Orville and Shasta, it was all about using a spinning rod with light line and some type of like finesse worm setup. And when we first started fishing, it was like, I remember going to Paradise Tackle or Paradise Sporting Goods, which I ended up working at later in high school. But I remember going there and seeing all these pink worms, all these like, morning dawn worms. And back then it was all hand pours and all custom stuff from around, the local area. And we would fish them on these little darter heads. Darter heads are not something that you see very often anymore, and if you do see them, they're generally not for a straight tail worm. But back in California, we were fishing those darter heads, which had a pretty, a pointy head to them and a 90-degree line tie. And the great thing about those darter heads was that they were the weight was kind of distributed on the hook. In fact, if you took like the hover rig from Core Tackle, kind of similar. I mean, you're not rigging it the same at all. Let me see if I can find one. I got my box of Core Tackle stuff here that I just got in. All right, so it kind of looked like this, except for the hook or the weight, wasn't wholly in the bait. The head of the let me take it out of here. That'll be a better way to show you guys. Hold on one second. So you would fish it like this. You'd rig it so the worm, that's the only part of the weight that was showing. But you would still have some of the lead, which would have like a barb on it and stuff, inside a straight tail worm. Like, the long shots from Z-Man would be a good example of one that I use today. That one right there. But anyways, the reason why guys, I learned pretty quick that the reason why guys were using this instead of like a shaky head or a ball head style was because the darter head actually created a really cool glide to it. So like when you hopped it up off the bottom, it glided just like a hover rig does nowadays. And so I learned a lot about darter head fishing, but also drop shotting, fishing jigs and things like that. So I love Shasta and Orville. I know this is kind of a long-winded way to kind of share with you why I like those lakes, but I love those lakes because it taught me those techniques. And another reason why I love Shasta and Orville and those lakes in that category is because I was learning how to catch spotted bass. Great spotted bass lake. There is largemouth in there, but spotted bass is a big deal. And so I got to learn spotted bass. And there's just so many fish in those lakes. You go to Shasta and Orville, you're going to catch some fish. You just tie on some type of finesse rig, whether it's a darter head, if you can even find those darter heads anymore, whether it's a drop shot, a Ned rig is a absolute murderer, on Orville and Shasta. Just go out there and you're going to have a fun time catching fish. They may be pretty small, but you're going to catch some fish. And it also taught me a lot about like rock transitions and how bass relate to certain types of rock at certain times and things like that. So Shasta, Orville, definitely some of my favorites. But there's also a smaller fishery that nobody on here, except for my friends in that area, is going to know what I'm talking about. I actually have a few videos on the channel from way back in the day fishing this fishery. But it's actually a retention pond-like situation from the what comes down from Lake Orville, and it's called the Afterbay. So it's essentially just a shallow water retention pond from the runoff from Lake Orville Dam, and it's got a lot of different qualities that really brought me to the skill sets that I have today. Fishing around reeds. There was a ton of toolies, the round reeds that you find on like the Delta and stuff. It had clear water. It also had steelhead in it. So steelhead and trout. So you could actually fish some of those bigger baits to catch, fish that were gorging themselves on, trout and salmon species. You could go fish some grass, shallow water, dirty water, all different types of stuff. But that was a really fun fishery, and it was inexpensive to fish. I don't think that there was a ramp fee as opposed to like Lake Orville, which the last time I was there was like $20 to launch your boat. Pretty crazy, but I would take my little, John boat with my trolling motor down to the Afterbay, and that's really where I cut my teeth doing what I learned to do before I moved to Florida. That was kind of the springboard for me to learn how to fish those natural lakes, even though it wasn't a natural fishery, but it's set up just like a natural fishery. So I would implore you guys to go check out those videos that I did on the Afterbay. And finally, another fishery that I really need to give a shout out to that I really enjoyed. I only fished there once, so I didn't get to really explore it that much, but I fished a small tournament out there, Lake Berryessa. Lake Berryessa is probably, outside of like Table Rock Lake in Missouri, is the best multi-species bass lake in the country. I'm talking about spots, largemouth, and smallmouth. All three species are in, the last time I fished it, which has been a while, it's been over a decade now, they're in abundance and they're good quality too. So it's just a lot of fun to fish Berryessa. But the one thing that people on the East Coast don't realize, or the rest of the country don't realize about California, is that the natural resources and the bass fishing over there is by far some of the best. I'm going out on a limb to say this, but as far as diversity, the type of fish that you're fishing for, the size of the fish that you're fishing for, there's just no better place to bass fish in the country. The problem is, it is a very expensive state. And like I said, Lake Orville, you'd pay $20 a day just to launch there. So that's why it kind of has a bad rap. And it's kind of like far removed from like core bass fishing country over here in the East Coast. So there is a reason why I moved over to Tennessee, but it's not because the bass fishing sucks in California. That is far from the truth. So anyways, guys, I just wanted to share, my experiences on the West Coast. I love California as far as the natural resources and where I grew up. and would really encourage any of you guys, if you get an opportunity to go fish any of those fisheries that I talked about today, as well as Clear Lake and the Delta, do it. You will thank me later. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for the question. And I'm going to see you guys out on the water. Make sure you trust the process.